At my engagement party, I picked up my name tag from the neatly arranged table near the entrance, expecting it to say something sweet, like bride to be, or just my name in cursive script. But instead, in bold, precise lettering, it read, Placeholder Wife. I blinked at it once, then again, thinking maybe I'd misread it. My mind fumbled for some kind of logical explanation, some scenario where this was just a bizarre mistake. But the words were clear, sharp, intentional. I looked up instinctively, scanning the room. There had to be someone nearby, stifling a laugh, waiting to explain it was a prank, an offbeat joke maybe orchestrated by one of Nathan's college buddies. But no. The guests around me were unfazed, sipping champagne from slender flutes and chatting in low-polished voices that hummed like background noise in a boutique hotel lounge. I felt like I'd accidentally wandered into someone else's celebration, someone I didn't belong to. My pulse thundered in my ears, my skin prickled with heat, and my dress in icy lavender satin I'd spent days picking out suddenly felt too tight, too noticeable. Nathan's family had a taste for understatement. They didn't do bold or bright or loud. They did tailored, tasteful, minimal. I'd chosen this dress hoping it would strike the perfect balance, refined, but still me. I forced a smile, small and stiff, and tried to shove down the sick twist in my stomach. Maybe I told myself it was just a typo. Maybe it was supposed to say future wife or soon-to-be Mrs., or literally anything else. Anything but placeholder. That's when I heard her. Victoria Whitman, Nathan's mother, speaking in that saccharine tone she'd perfected over the years. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, just soft enough to seem accidental but loud enough to land its target. We'll find him a real one soon. The words floated out like perfume laced with poison. My body went cold. Next to her, Elaine, Nathan's aunt with the perpetual smirk, let out a brittle chuckle. It wasn't a laugh meant to be hidden. It was the kind of sound that hit you sideways, the kind that stings long after it's over. I was still holding the name tag, fingers clutched around the edge of the card like it might catch fire at any second. I hadn't even moved. I lifted my gaze, desperate for confirmation that someone else had heard what I had. Maybe a startled glance, an awkward shuffle, a sympathetic wince. But the people around me? They laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just casually, comfortably, as if they were all in on the joke and I was the only one too naive to get it. I wasn't a guest, I was the punchline. My throat tightened, constricting like I'd swallowed glass. I tried to breathe deeply, but the air didn't fill my lungs right. There was a dull pressure in my chest, like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. My hands, cold, now trembled slightly as I fished for my phone from the small beaded clutch I held. I needed something, anything, to anchor myself. I stared at the screen, my eyes darting across random notifications, none of which I processed. I looked up and scanned the crowd. There, near the mahogany bar lined with polished glasses and artisanal liquor bottles, stood Nathan. His back was half-turned, one hand resting casually on the marble counter, as he laughed with a circle of college friends looking entirely at ease. His suit was immaculate navy with subtle pinstripes fitted to perfection. He hadn't even noticed I'd arrived. A wild urge surged through me, an instinct to storm over there, slap the name tag down in front of him, and demand an explanation. Was this his idea of a joke? His mother's? But a quieter voice inside me, softer but heavier, whispered a scarier possibility. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if this was what they all truly thought of me? What if I was just filling space until someone more appropriate came along? Someone with sleek, ironed hair and a pedigree to match less Megan from Maine and more Madison from Montauk. Less stray rescuing, small-town bakery-loving girl with freckles and messy hair, and more polished debutante with a last name you could drop at fundraisers. My stomach knotted as I took in the opulence around me, the crystal chandeliers casting fractured light on the hardwood floors, the clink of expensive silverware, the scent of rosewater and expensive cologne hanging in the air like fog. Everything here was beautiful, pristine, tailored to the exact specifications of high society. Everything except me. And yet what Nathan did next would shatter the script I thought I was following, forcing me to confront a truth I'd been too afraid to name. But to understand why that moment mattered so deeply, why it cracked something open and rearranged the air around me, you'd need to know how I even ended up in that glittering, brittle room in the first place. That's why I'm sharing this. Not just for me, but maybe for you too. If you've ever stood at the edge of belonging, unsure if you were welcome or felt like you were fading into someone else's life, then maybe this story is yours a little bit too. If you're still here, thank you. It means more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw ones, real ones, I hope you'll consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It's a small gesture, but it helps keep these voices, our voices, out there. My name is Megan Hayes. I was born and raised in a small, salt-kissed town along the coast of Maine, a place where strangers still wave from their porches and the sea wind weaves through every memory like a hymn. In our town, nothing is ever too far. The ocean was 10 minutes away in any direction, and my family's warmth was always closer still. We weren't wealthy. We didn't own boats or penthouses or golf club memberships, but we had a bakery that smelled like vanilla sugar and cinnamon rolls, year-round a faded porch swing that creaked in rhythm with summer breezes, and a bond that didn't require polishing to shine. My mother, a woman with flour always dusting her sleeves, runs that bakery on Main Street. People come more for her stories than the pastries, though the almond croissants alone could start a small revolution. My father retired from firefighting, but incapable of idleness, still volunteers when the snowstorms roll in, digging out neighbors' cars before they even ask. Then there's my little brother Lucas, the kind of wild you don't try to tame, just love louder. And Grandpa Henry, who stepped in like a steady anchor when my parents' marriage began to fray at the seams. We're imperfect, and noisy, and stubborn as hell, but when we love, it's with the full force of our hearts. We show up even when it's messy, especially then. So when I met Nathan Whitman, it was like bumping into a character from a world I'd only seen in films. We collided at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was setting up centerpieces for my event design firm, hands covered in floral wire and peony petals, when this impossibly well put together man in a tailored navy suit asked if I was the artist behind the hanging flower chandelier. He was polished, gentle-voiced, with this quiet assurance that didn't demand the room, but still managed to own it. He told me his name, with a soft, self-deprecating smile, Nathan Whitman, the finance world's golden boy, who made hedge funds sound like lullabies. We began dating not long after, and for a while it was as if I'd stepped through the screen into one of those glossy, elegant stories, the kind with weekend getaways to the Hamptons tastings in candlelit wine cellars, spontaneous tickets to Broadway premieres. Nathan made space for me, always pulling out my chair or brushing his hand along the small of my back, like he was grounding me in a world that might otherwise carry me away. And for a time, I believed I belonged in it. But I should have known the real test wasn't him, it was her. The first time I met Victoria Whitman was at the front door of their stately Upper East Side brownstone, where gold light spilled onto the stone steps like something out of a painting. She opened the door and looked at me the way one might examine a thrift store, find in a designer boutique. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're Megan," she said, her voice soft as silk but cool as marble. "You're sweet." The pause between those two words felt like a blade. It didn't stop there. Over time, Victoria became a master of weaponized politeness. She would suggest I wear more neutrals because color can be so distracting, or offer to tidy up my resume, though I wasn't job hunting. Once she tilted her head thoughtfully and said I had farm girl charm, not with admiration, but the kind of smirking tolerance one reserves for mud on designer shoes. I tried to let it roll off. Nathan wasn't like her. He laughed at her rigid views and told me I was refreshing. I clung to that. When he proposed, it was in Central Park, under the golden hush of a late afternoon sun. A picnic blanket, a string quartet, a ring that sparkled like starlight. I wept, not because of the size of the diamond, but because I believed he saw me. All of me. The chaotic, the emotional, the fiercely loyal girl who never felt quite enough in rooms like his. For a moment, I felt utterly chosen. The weeks before our engagement party passed in a blur of white folders, linen swatches, and passive-aggressive meetings with Victoria about floral arrangements and appropriate guest lists. She insisted the party be held at the Westchester Country Club. It's tradition, she said, with a tight-lipped smile that left no room for protest. I didn't argue. I just wanted it to go smoothly. I told myself we were getting better. I told myself she was thawing. I was wrong. As I stood at that party, the name tag still burning in my clutch like a hot coal, The realization hit me with brutal clarity. She didn't need more time. She had never truly seen me as Nathan's future. And the worst part, the part that hollowed something inside me, was that I wasn't sure Nathan did either. I stared down at that card again. Placeholder wife. The phrase didn't just hurt it branded. I could have turned and walked out then and there, left them all to their crystal chandeliers and champagne toasts. But a quieter, steelier part of me rooted my feet to the ground. I wouldn't let them see me break. I slipped the tag into my clutch, straightened my spine, and forced a smile so wide and tight it made my jaw ache. Inside the ballroom, everything glittered with practiced grace. Guests stood in clusters discussing ski trips and Mediterranean villas, laughing with that effortless sort of ease that only those raised on generational wealth could perfect. The chandeliers above sparkled like winter frost, and waiters glided through the room with trays of caviar and rosé. And there I was a ghost at my own celebration. Then I saw Her Victoria standing regally near the head table, flanked by two perfectly styled women I didn't recognize. Their voices dropped as I approached, but their eyes flicked to me, sharp and assessing. "You look festive," Victoria said, brushing the air near my cheek with a faux kiss. Her gaze slid down to my dress, a soft smile curving her lips. "That color's certainly brave." Brave. As if I'd shown up to a funeral in neon. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or maybe both. But instead I murmured a thank you and kept walking, feeling each step like a dare not to falter. I looked for Nathan. He was still by the bar, caught mid-laugh with his arm slung around Evan, his college roommate. He hadn't seen me, or maybe he had, and chose not to. Either way, it felt like a knife. In that moment, I felt not only invisible, I felt like I didn't even exist in his world. I drifted toward a small group where my best friend Tessa stood talking with my cousin Emma and Uncle Frank. Tessa had flown in from Chicago just to be there, and I thought maybe standing near someone who loved me might tether me back to myself. But Tessa saw it instantly, the rigidity in my shoulders, the way I blinked too slowly like my mind was buffering. Her eyes narrowed in that sharp, intuitive way only best friends seem to master. She stepped toward me, voice lowered to a murmur, as if she were reading a private script written across my face. What happened? The moment her words touched air, my composure cracked. I didn't bother dressing the truth in politeness or pretense. I told her everything: the name tag, the venom-laced whisper from Victoria, the low chuckles that followed like wind chimes made of knives. As I spoke, her face shifted, softness gone, replaced by a granite stillness. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed, her voice like ice pressed to fire. "Megan, that's not a mistake. That's calculated." I nodded. Of course I knew. But somehow, hearing it out loud, rendered real by someone who cared, was worse. It anchored the truth I had tried to float above. "I don't even think Nathan noticed," I whispered, the words coming out brittle, splintering under their own weight. "He's just over there, laughing like everything's fine, like I'm not unraveling 3 feet away." But it was what I said next that terrified me most, because it was the confession I hadn't let myself think, let alone voice. I don't know if he wants to notice. Tessa didn't flinch. She gripped my arm, not hard but firm, like she was tethering me back to something solid. "Then make him notice." That line cleaved through me, sharp, necessary, a jolt of oxygen in a room that had grown stale. All the nodding, the silence, the smiling through discomfort, it had gotten me here, reduced to wallpaper in a room filled with people raising glasses to a version of me that didn't exist, a ghost haunting the edges of her own story. But in that moment, something inside me shifted, not into rage or grief, but into a radiant kind of clarity, the kind that can't be undone. Nathan didn't know what was coming, but he was about to find out. And if he did know, well, that would tell me everything I needed to know. I don't remember walking to the bathroom. Just the blur of glittering gowns and cold laughter around me smeared like oil paint on glass. Then suddenly I was inside alone with my reflection, my breath fogging the edge of a marble sink. I gripped the porcelain so tightly my knuckles paled. The quiet was unbearable, the sterile echo of a room designed to mute, to strip sound and self away. My face in the mirror was unfamiliar. Lipstick faded into pale outlines, tendrils of hair beginning to fall loose from what had been a carefully constructed updo. My eyes looked hollow, empty of sparkle, full of questions. What am I doing here? The thought struck like a body blow. Not, why would she do this, or how could they be so cruel? But the deeper cut. Why am I pretending this is okay? I had bent and twisted myself into their image for too long, smiling through Victoria's thinly veiled barbs, changing my dress because she deemed the original too loud, even surrendering the cozy barn I had dreamed of for this frosted palace of performative grace because it was more appropriate. And Nathan, the man I was supposed to be marrying, he hadn't noticed. Or worse, he had noticed and turned away. I pressed a paper towel to my brow, trying to cool the heat rising behind my eyes. My hands trembled again, not from grief this time, but from something clearer, cleaner. Resolve. I wasn't going to let this night write my story for me. If they wanted to reduce me, I would rise. If they dismissed me, I would demand space. I straightened my dress, repinned the stray lock of hair, and held my reflection until it steadied. I wasn't walking back into that room as the girl they had hoped would shrink. I was walking back as Megan Hayes, whole, sure, and unwilling to be small. The soft pulse of classical music greeted me as I stepped into the hallway. I could hear the laughter again, the crisp clink of champagne glasses, the measured rhythm of cultivated conversation. But this time, I didn't care. I spotted Nathan near the ballroom center, now champagne in hand, chatting with his uncle. Guests were beginning to drift toward the microphone at the far end, forming a polite semicircle in anticipation of the toasts. He saw me then, and for the first time that evening, our eyes truly met. There was something in his expression that cracked confusion first, then guilt, and beneath that something close to fear. Good, I thought. Let him feel it. I walked forward with deliberate grace, every step pulling me deeper into myself. I felt Tessa's eyes on me, warm and proud, silently willing me forward. "You've got this," they said without sound. Carla Victoria was handed the mic first, of course. She delivered a polished toast with the smile of a hostess on autopilot, her voice dripping with practiced warmth and subtext. People laughed at the right moments, nodding with glazed courtesy. Then Nathan stepped up. He cleared his throat glass in hand, and the light from the chandeliers caught the rim like fire on crystal. His voice, usually so steady, carried a subtle tremble now, just enough for me to wonder, did he know? "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "It means the world to have the people we love under one roof to celebrate this next step in our lives, our lives." I stood off to the side, just beyond the ring of guests, far enough to feel separate, but close enough to catch every nuance. My pulse thudded in places I didn't know had rhythm, my ears, my fingertips, even my knees. I didn't move. Nathan scanned the room, his gaze brushing over faces like a breeze across grass. But not mine. Not yet. "I want to go a little off script," he said, voice quiet but clear. A few guests chuckled. I noticed Victoria stiffen her glass, hovering midair. "There's been some talk," he continued, some of it whispered, some of it not so quietly, about Megan. There it was. My breath hitched, muscles coiled. I waited. "She's not the woman some of you expected me to end up with," he said. "She didn't come from a legacy family. She didn't grow up skiing in Vermont or attending debutante balls. She didn't know what foie gras was until last year." Polite laughter bubbled from the crowd, but his tone shifted, then softened. "And that's exactly why I love her." The room silenced, as if someone had cut the power. He looked at me, and the air between us held. "Megan sees people. She really sees them. She listens when most folks are waiting to speak. She makes banana pancakes at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep. She hums when she's nervous and tears up at those ridiculous dog food commercials. And even when people treat her like she doesn't matter, she finds a way to make them feel like they do." Someone gasped. I heard a sharp clink, Victoria's wine glass set down too hard. "And I've let that slide," Nathan continued, his voice raw now. "I've stood by while people said things, laughed at things, labeled her with names she never deserved. And I stayed silent." He paused, one of those heavy, soul-deep pauses that seems to throb in the air. "Until now." He raised his glass. "To Megan Hayes. Not a placeholder, not a stand-in, not someone I'm settling for, but the only real one in this room." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Tessa's soft gasp, Emma's quiet sob. And even my Uncle Frank, usually too gruff for sentiment, began a slow, deliberate clap. My vision blurred as the tears finally slipped free, not from shame, not from anger, not even from the ache of humiliation, but from the startling, all-consuming experience of being seen. Truly seen. For who I was. For what I carried. Nathan stepped forward. Not with dramatics, not with grand declarations or sweeping gestures, but with something much rarer sincerity. The kind that vibrates beneath the skin and rewrites the air around it. The crowd, once a wall of distant eyes and curated smiles, parted without resistance, folding like a curtain opening for something sacred. He didn't rush. He simply reached out, palm open, eyes clear. "I'm sorry," he said, not as a whisper, but with a voice that rang through the chandeliered silence. "I should have said it sooner. I should have said it louder, but I'm saying it now." And I don't even remember stepping toward him. One moment, my arms were tight at my sides, clenched around everything I hadn't voiced. The next, my hand was in his fingers, curling instinctively around the warmth that waited for me. The ballroom, once chilled and brittle, pulsed with an unfamiliar softness. It wasn't the lighting or the music that changed, it was me. Or maybe for the first time that evening, it was them seeing me as I was. Across the room, Victoria's expression tightened, her lips pressed into a pale, unreadable line. She looked in that instant like someone who had bitten into something sour and found it clinging to her tongue. But I didn't flinch. I didn't care, because for the first time all night, I wasn't a ghost haunting the edges of Nathan's world. I wasn't trying to fit into theirs. I was chosen not because I had finally become what they expected, but because someone had finally chosen me as I was. The thing about moments like that, the kind that crack open everything you've been swallowing down for months, the kind that unmake and remake you all at once, is that they slow time. Everything after becomes quieter, surreal, like walking through the echo of your own heartbeat. The rest of the night unfolded around me, but I wasn't drifting anymore. I was rooted, present, undeniable. I no longer flinched when I caught someone's eye. I didn't scan the room for signs of judgment or brace myself against invisible blows. I simply stood in my skin, not waiting for permission to belong. People who hadn't even acknowledged me an hour earlier began to approach, hesitant at first, then with practiced charm. They shook my hand, complimented my composure, my dress, my grace under pressure, as if they hadn't just witnessed a social rebirth, as if they hadn't stood on the wrong side of the line until the tide turned. I didn't hate them for it. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but something softer, acceptance of the truth they had seen the narrative shift and didn't quite know what to do with it. It was easier to align with power than to question the silence that had come before. Only one person stayed frozen across the ballroom. Victoria. She didn't approach. She didn't smile. She simply lingered in place, drink untouched her expression, a mask of refined restraint. But for a single breath, our eyes locked, and in that brief, brittle second, I saw it, not remorse, not warmth, but recognition. She had finally seen the woman she couldn't dress down with veiled suggestions or diminish with honey-laced insults. I wasn't her project. I wasn't her problem. I was beyond her reach. And that was enough. Later, long after the last toast had been made, and the staff had begun clearing empty flutes and wilting floral arrangements, I slipped out onto the terrace. The night air was cool, perfumed with rose petals and damp grass, and the moon hung like a silver sentinel above the quiet estate. I needed the stillness, the pause between scenes. Nathan found me there, his footsteps hesitant on the flagstone, his silhouette softened by the moonlight. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood a few paces away, unsure if the warmth of earlier still lingered or if it had vanished with the applause. "I meant what I said," he finally murmured. "I know I said my voice low, honest." He stepped closer, then slipped his arm around me, not with ownership or apology, but with invitation. I leaned into him not out of need, but choice. Because in that moment I trusted the stillness between us more than any declaration. We didn't speak much after that. Some conversations don't need words. Sometimes the truest apology is in presence, the way someone stays, listens, and refuses to look away. The next morning, as the sunlight crept through the slats of our hotel blinds, I reached into my clutch and pulled out the name tag, placeholder wife. The letters still crisp, still audacious. I turned it over in my hands, staring at it like a relic from a past I had shed overnight. Part of me wanted to tear it to pieces, burn it, cast it into the wind. But I didn't. I kept it. Not as a scar, but as a testament. A symbol of what I endured, what I rose from. A reminder that even when people try to label you, contain you, reduce you into something safe for them, that label holds no power unless you wear it willingly. Because here's the truth. You are not anyone's placeholder. You are not a stand-in for someone more palatable, more proper, more polished. You are your own story, and the ones who matter, they'll learn to read it, or they'll fall away trying. Nathan and I had a long conversation after the party. No polished pleasantries, no safe euphemisms, just truth raw and necessary. I told him everything what I felt, what I feared, what I would no longer bury beneath silence. And he listened, not defensively, not dismissively, but deeply. And then he apologized not just with his voice, but with comprehension. He promised me that from now on we would lead our relationship, not Victoria, not polite society, just us. Things with her are still complicated. That hasn't magically changed. But the part that mattered, the part that had been hurting me the most, I let go of. I no longer orbit her approval like a dying star chasing light. I don't need it. I never did. What I needed, what I finally have, is respect. From Nathan. And more importantly, from myself. So if you've ever found yourself cast in the background of your own life, if you've ever been labeled too much or not enough or treated like a temporary stand-in for someone worthier, let me tell you this, you don't have to fight for a seat at the wrong table. Build your own. Sit at it boldly. Because you were never a placeholder. You were the real one all along. And if you've made it this far, if you felt this with me, thank you. Truly. Sharing this wasn't easy, but if it reached even one person, made someone feel less alone, more seen, more whole, then every word was worth it.